What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Garbin's Garage video. Today, we'll be refreshing my 335i suspension with some brand new Bilstein goodies. Let's get into it. So the suspension I have chosen is going to be the Bilstein B4 OEM style replacement. So these are just going to be your normal struts. I'm going to transfer my stock M Sport springs over and put them all together. So what I like about these is the ride quality is going to be fantastic. I'm retaining my stock springs, which are just stiff enough for me. And for our rears, we also have our Bilstein B4 with new bump stops, new shields, and all these little miscellaneous parts regarding the top mounts, because BMW is fun like that. Then our last bit of parts for the front are going to be front control arms and then the camber arm. So both of these known to break in the middle right here on this big rubber spot. So we're going to replace them, hopefully improve our ride quality. Every part in this video has been linked in the description, so feel free to purchase. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's get into the video. All right, with the vehicle jacked up, we're going to start with the front. So remove the front wheels. Everyone do a stud conversion. You won't regret it. Here's a good view at this passenger side shock, completely destroyed. And this is what happens when your bump stop's gone. You rub on the fender, totally messes up the fender liner. So to start, we got to take these little brake line connectors off. Big nut for the sway bar end length. And then this is a clamp style similar to the E46, so take that off. Take the top nuts out, should give us enough room to pull this down and out. 16 millimeter. 17 millimeter on the back of the end link, and then it's a 16 on the front. All right, so for the front strut, we have 3 13s up top, similar to any BMW. So once we get that off, it'll allow the suspension to droop a bit, and we'll have enough to lower down, take the nut out, pull it off. With the 3 nuts off, I'm holding this kind of with my leg. There we go. Now I can let it kind of droop down. So here we have all this flexibility in the suspension, which should be enough. We have someone push down on this to get it out. So here's my method for getting enough room to get the shock tower to clear the fender. So big pry bar in right here. I'm going to be pushing on top of this front caster arm, and then it goes right into where the lower control arm mount is. So helps to have a friend with you to help, so good thing I got that right here. Try not to stand too much in the way, but here we go. You're gonna pry down right there. Gives you enough room to clear the fender, just like that. Another thing to watch out for is this wheel speed sensor right here, so just unplugs from here. Make sure to pop it out of its little grommets. So right here we have 18 millimeter on this side, and then an 18 millimeter on the other side, and there's a little bracket. All right. Bolt through the middle. All right, little penetrating fluid, and I just hammered in this pry bar in between the space, and that gives you just enough room to slide our old strut right out. All right, so doing struts correctly, we're gonna use a spring compressor. I'm sure some of you are just gonna take an impact and shoot this out into the driveway, but we're gonna do it right. So layer on in the spring compressor. We got our arms on the bottom grabbing the springs. We got these 2 up here. Since we're just disassembling this, it's okay to push on the very top. And we have a 21 millimeter nut on the top. So I'm gonna slowly compress this until our spring is just barely off. And very carefully. You're not supposed to use an impact, but it's the quickest way. So sometimes it'll spin like it is now. So we might just have to do an old trick with this. Look at that. Never mind, we're all set. So a quick little tip with strut towers on these BMWs. There is a little nipple that sits right here. Here it is on the stock strut. So what I did is I punched this out, because what that does is for the camber adjustment on BMWs, since it is a McPherson strut, this top hat will be allowed to slide back and forth in the slotted holes. So this little puck right here stops it from being able to slide. So if you punch these out, then you can get a little more camber adjustment out of the front. All right, so we got the new strut in. Here's our top hat. We're just gonna slowly compress. It's gonna be scary, and it always is with BMW springs, because God, do they suck. But basically, almost there. Top being exposed. There we go. Our nut is started. Slowly give it a little bit of And make sure once you have the strut out of the compressor to properly torque down the nut, whether that be with an impact gun or with a wrench and a Allen key like you're supposed to. Yeah. All right, struts all back together, tighten down. Now we're just gonna do the same process before to get it below the fender. Maybe a little tighter now that this one's taller. So close. All right, with our front strut all assembled, we're gonna go ahead and do the control arms on this side. So we have our front control arm and our lower. So a quick thing I wanted to say with this control arm, since this is a stationary bushing, we are just gonna leave this loose in here until the car is flat on the alignment rack, and we're gonna torque this when it is at ride height. All right, so on this side, we have one 18mm. So make yourself a big ratchet. Go ahead and loosen this one. Bear with me, guys. My microphone did go out for this portion of the video, but only a couple of minutes. So I'll do my best to cover it. So it's one 18mm. I went over to grab my electric ratchet just to make the process a little quicker. The bottom nut's going to be a 21mm. It's easiest to come out with a 1/2 inch impact. So here we are running into the same thing as the sway bar end link, except these ball joints do not have a socket on the side. So I'm going to have to do something ghetto and grab these with vice grips. I don't recommend using vice grips, but I'm only doing it in this situation because I'm replacing the whole control arm and I don't care about the ball joint. So after that, the ball joint should be loose. You can go ahead and pop the front and then the back out. Here's the whole piece. You can see our ball joint's nice and flimsy. Putting the new one in, exact same process. I'm going to put the front in first, and then that gives me enough room to push up and get the bigger portion of the bushing in. Then I'm going to grab my 18mm, go ahead and start feeding it through the hole. Once you have that bolt in and started, you can go ahead and use your electric ratchet or even just hand tools, depending on what you have. So just going to tighten it down, and remember, I'm going to leave this loose because it is a torqued bushing, meaning that it has to be tightened down at ride height. And for the bottom bolt, this new control arm had a 24mm, so I'm just going to repeat the same process. And most of the time you can just impact these on, but if it's a used control arm, you may have to hold on to it. For the actual lower control arm, it is also an 18mm on both sides, so I'm going to break it loose with this long 3/8. And then you'll be able to see it start spinning on that left side, and then I'm going to grab it with an 18mm wrench on the opposite side. With the nut now off, I'm just going to give the end of the bolt a little tap with a hammer, and that should let me pull it out pretty easy. With the subframe mount portion of the bolt out, I now have access to the 21 that holds it to the spindle. So I'm going to break it loose with this 3/8, and it is going to try to spin just like the middle one, so I'll show you a quick trick for that. So here I am using a pull jack to push up on the ball joint. If you're doing this in your garage, a floor jack does just fine. But it's just going to lift up, put pressure on it to stop the ball joint from spinning so that the nut can be removed. The subframe squeeze is really tight on these lower control arms, so they a lot of times need a little bit of help. So here's a big pry bar. Just going to pry on the end. Slides right out. And man, look at all the oil on the floor. BMW, man. All underneath. Go. All right, new control arm. Might be a little bit difficult to squeeze in, but we'll get it in, and I'm going to tap this part with a hammer right here and make sure is this the right side that came off? Incorrect. Close call, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we always check our parts. Rubber mallet. We're just going to put it in the subframe right here. Give her some taps. We're just gonna be out here, just gonna barely tighten this, leave it pretty snug, similar to like I did with this one. These are actually, you have to torque them at ride height, just because it's a solid bushing. So I'm gonna put the pull jack underneath, go ahead and tighten that with the ratchet. All right, both sides are finished. Here you can see the front control arms. Your strut up there. Here's the new front and lower control arm. New strut. Now we're gonna go to the rear, take the tires off. So here's the view of our left side. Here's our shock. As you can see, comes straight up into here, which is inside of the trunk. So we'll do this side first. We got a push pin here, push pin here. This whole fender liner kind of thing will come out, and then the top of the strut should be right there. With the tabs removed, that little cover right there, take that off, shock bolts under there. Top bolt is going to be a 16 millimeter, so I just have this on our little impact. There we go. Here's our first couple little pieces. We got a little piece of foam, a washer, and the nut. So we got a couple of them right here. Pop the shock out. Bam. And we're back. No microphone once again, so we're using the iPhone. Okay, along with that 17 millimeter, we have two. These are E-Torx E12s. One here, one here. So there's a mount that kind of sits inside the control arm. Let's take these two out. All right, with our top nut removed, the shock fully extends, so we're just gonna kind of lift from the bottom, push it up to compress it, and then take it out. And there it is. All right, so we have the new shock here with our bump stop and sleeve already on, so put that on, new mount, or sorry, existing old mount on the new strut. So we got a whole bunch of little pieces that come in this kit, so we have this part, didn't just drop that. It's gonna go on here. The bump stop's gonna sit in the bottom of that really nice. Have this little cylinder cone shaped piece right here. And we have another piece of foam. So with this is all basically just gonna squish to the body. We have a little rubber piece that goes over this as well. But this squishes into the body, and then we have another piece of foam and the bolt that's gonna be inside of the trunk. All right, so same process, put it back in. We're gonna compress this down. Not too difficult. Top first. Bottom, I mean, push it through, squish down one more time, cut that out. All right, squish it down, push, let it go back up. And there we go, installed. With both fasteners reinstalled, ready to throw the trunk back together. All right, car is all done. Everything's tight, except for the front control arms, of course. So here's all the parts left over, control arms. Look at these blown out front shocks. I'm surprised this car lasted that long on this. I mean, 140,000 miles on the stock suspension is pretty impressive. Here's what happens when you go from really good fitment, from really washed out suspension, and you throw brand new top hats in. Now we got a lift kit. So eventually I'll probably do some lowering springs, and we'll see a video on that. Alrighty, we were taking the car for the first test drive after tightening all the suspension and getting a fresh alignment. My first impressions right away is just the road feel is much less. And that's mostly due to the front control arms, the new bushings. So even just right now, there's much less vibration coming through the wheel. The car overall is less jolty. I can feel less imperfections on the road. As far as the struts go, the car feels much firmer. Even though I still kept my existing springs, having those good shocks really helps get rid of all the body roll. Like even now, this is the stock sports suspension with good shocks. I can throw this thing around.